Imagine witnessing the birth of the most dominant team in sports history with an unbeatable car, unlimited resources, and the two fastest drivers of the moment. On one side, a two-time world champion who wants to keep winning and cement his legacy as one of the greatest in history. On the other side, a young prodigy who, after years of showing his talent, finally gets the chance to fulfill his dream: to become a Formula One champion. On paper, it's the perfect team, and at first, everything works. The polls keep coming, victories arrive easily, and the press talks about an unbeatable alliance. However, the two are much more evenly matched than expected, and soon tensions begin to arise that no one saw coming. Someone copies another's setups without permission. The engineers play favorites, and what began as a cordial relationship slowly turns into a cold war until everything breaks apart. Both drivers make a pact before a race, but one of them breaks the promise. A betrayal that destroys the relationship forever. From that day on, the team splits in two. Data is kept secret, there are suspicions of different engines, and the rumors of sabotage grow stronger and stronger. What follows is no longer just a competition, but a war. A war in which not only the decisions on the track matter, but also the alliances off it. Influence, corruption, and politics.
They treated me as a criminal.
A war so dirty that it ends with one of them leaving the team to sign with their biggest rival? Winning is no longer enough. Now the goal is to destroy the other. The rivalry becomes so extreme that at a decisive moment, neither of them is willing to give in, because that day, winning a title was worth more than their own lives.
And I felt so disgusted that I didn't even have the strength to do it.
And stay till the end. Because when it seemed like everything was over, they found a way to keep making each other's lives miserable, even with one already retired.
He's being a coward.
This is the story between Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost, which pitted talent against tradition, honor against politics. And that turned this rivalry into the most ruthless in the history of Formula One. The race, held under the intense reign of Monaco in 1984, is remembered as one of the most controversial in the history of Formula One, and for being the first chapter of the most ruthless rivalry the sport has ever witnessed. Alain Prost, the new champion with Renault and McLaren's top signing, arrived as the title favorite alongside teammate Niki Lauda. At the opposite end of the paddock, Brazilian rookie Ayrton Senna da Silva was debuting with the modest Toleman team. But what no one expected was that this young man would almost immediately overshadow the big names in the sport. Qualifying happened in dry conditions and showed the usual hierarchy. Prost took pole position, while Senna, with a much inferior car, could only manage 13th, 2.3 seconds behind the pole sitter. However, the race began under a downpour that leveled the playing field. For Ayrton, it was the perfect opportunity to show his talent. For Prost, the chance to start the championship with a sure victory. In conditions that sidelined Nigel Mansell and made Niki Lauda and Alain Prost drive cautiously, Senna kept an impressive pace for the conditions. From 13th position, he moved up to second place, overtaking champions like Keke Rosberg and Niki Lauda. Meanwhile, Prost was comfortably leading the race with more than 35 seconds ahead on lap 21. But the Brazilian was closing the gap lap after lap. As the conditions worsened, Prost radioed to ask for the race to be stopped and signaled to the marshals indicating it was dangerous to continue. Finally, on lap 32, the race director waved the red flag. At that very moment, Senna overtook Prost and celebrated the victory. But according to the rules, the official positions were determined based on the last lap completed by all drivers, lap 31. That's why Prost was the winner and Senna finished in second place. However, no one doubted that if the race had continued, the victory would have gone to the Brazilian. This decision was controversial and sparked the first dispute between Senna and the organization, a conflict that persisted for years. Ayrton said the following:
Formula One is political, there's a lot of money.
Senna surprised everyone, even Prost, despite not winning. In just his second race, he showed that he could compete against anyone, even with an inferior car. And this was just the first encounter between the Brazilian and the Frenchman, something insignificant compared to what would happen a few years later. At the end of 1984, Prost lost the title by just half a point to Lauda, However, his revenge came quickly because the following year he won his first world championship. In 1986, he repeated the feat and became a two-time champion. With this, he became McLaren's leader, unaware that everything was about to change. On the other hand, for Senna, that flash under the rain in Monaco opened the door for him to join Lotus in 1985. In his first year with them, he earned his first wins in the category. But it was in 1986 where, despite not having a car as competitive as Prost's McLaren, he managed to get 7 pole positions, more than any other driver, and 3 of them were with a legendary car, the Lotus 98T. This car not only brought Senna crucial moments in his career, but it also symbolizes his skill and determination within Formula One. In 1988, Formula One changed forever. Senna's good relationship with Honda, forged during his time at Lotus in 1987, carried a lot of weight. When the Japanese started supplying engines to McLaren and the team looked for a teammate for Prost, that's how the duo of Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost was born. McLaren also built the MP44, a devastating car that had no rivals. Prost opened the season by winning in Brazil, Senna responded in Imola, and the tiebreaker came in Monaco, a key circuit for both of them. That year was the biggest challenge of the Brazilian's career, proving his talent with the best car against one of the all-time greatest drivers. For his part, Prost had to prove that he could remain the team leader and outperform his new teammate. In response, Senna answered emphatically in the qualifying session of the Monaco Grand Prix and achieved one of the most impressive laps of his life. His time was so incredible that he was 1.4 seconds faster than Prost and 1.2 seconds faster than Gerhard Berger. An overwhelming difference. On Sunday, that dominance led to an impeccable race. Senna pulled away from Prost and the rest from the start, widening his lead every lap.
The circuit for me was like a tunnel that I kept going through, and I realized that I was far beyond my conscious understanding.
For 66 laps, Ayrton maintained absolute control on the streets of the Principality. Even McLaren boss Ron Dennis asked him over the radio to slow down to secure a 1-2 finish for the team. Everything seemed decided until 11 laps from the end, a lapse in concentration caused him to crash and retire from the race. What could have been one of his most memorable victories became a tragedy for the Brazilian. But not only that, due to his retirement, it was Prost, his teammate and direct rival for the title, who inherited the victory. After this, Ayrton won 5 of the next 7 races, with a streak that led him to one of the most decisive and controversial moments in his fight against Prost for the championship, the 1988 Belgian Grand Prix. In the 1988 Belgian Grand Prix, Prost and Senna's direct clashes began. The score was 6-4 for the Brazilian, with 3 straight wins for him. At that point, Alain suspected Honda and McLaren favored Ayrton. Senna's previous friendship with the Japanese engineers, forged at Lotus, remained intact. And Prost noticed that there were more engineers working on his teammate's side of the garage. So the Frenchman didn't stay quiet and spoke publicly about the matter. His complaint escalated so much that Jean-Marie Balestre, president of Fédération Internationale du Sport Automobile, publicly demanded identical engines for both. But that wasn't the only problem for the Frenchman, because in addition, Senna was copying his setups. In the first race in Brazil, Ayrton had a problem with his car and had to drive Prost's spare car. At that moment, he discovered that his teammate's settings fit perfectly with his own driving style. That's why at Spa, the Frenchman tried to trick him by removing his car's wing at the last minute for more straight-line speed to surprise Ayrton. In qualifying, Senna took pole position, while Prost secured second place, trusting that the adjustments he made would benefit him during the race. Unfortunately for the Frenchman, the trap backfired, and he had problems with the car's balance and handling during the race. In comparison to Senna, who used Prost's original settings, even though Senna slipped at the start and was overtaken by the Frenchman, on the first pass through a Rouge, Ayrton, with more aerodynamic load, easily regained the lead. Senna quickly pulled away, while Prost, who was struggling with a car that no longer behaved the way he wanted, had to settle for second place. The Brazilian crossed the finish line just half a second ahead. That 1-2 secured the constructors' title with 5 races remaining, prompting Prost to say the championship was already decided.
Yes, I think that's it. I mean, there's no point in continuing to believe.
However, things changed radically again in the following races. In Estoril, the Frenchman absolutely needed the victory to stay in the championship, and the weekend started perfectly for him. Unlike what had happened during most of the year, the Frenchman took pole position while Senna could only manage second place. After 2 aborted race starts, at the 3rd start, Senna surprised Prost and snatched the lead from him. But at the start of the 2nd lap, the Frenchman used the Brazilian slipstream to take back the lead. Senna forced him against the wall at nearly 280 kilometers per hour, but Prost stood firm and passed him at the first corner. During the race, Alain's lead increased, and he held it until the checkered flag, while Senna had fuel consumption problems that dropped him to 6th place. However, the move at the start left Prost furious, who declared that nothing about his teammate's style surprised him anymore. Senna didn't stay quiet about it and said he didn't understand Prost's annoyance when he had pushed him before. With Prost's victories in Portugal and then in Spain, the Frenchman had recovered and was in a good position to fight for his 3rd world championship. Then came the most critical and impressive moment of the season, the 1988 Japanese Grand Prix. But before that, if you're enjoying this video, subscribe. The 1988 Japanese Grand Prix was the moment that defined everything. For Ayrton, it was the chance to achieve that first crown he had dreamed of since he was a child. For Prost, this was his long-awaited 3rd championship. At Suzuka, Senna had to win to secure the title, while Prost needed victory to keep the championship fight alive, until the final race in Australia. That day, the whole world witnessed one of the most epic comebacks in the history of sports. After another incredible performance in qualifying, Senna secured pole position, but at the start of the race, everything seemed to fall apart. His McLaren got stuck on the grid, and before reaching the first corner, he had dropped from pole to 14th place. Meanwhile, Prost, who made a perfect start, took the lead and put himself in a position to take the victory. For Senna, the situation was tough. He needed to pass 13 drivers to become champion. Prost, on the other hand, only needed to defend the lead. But far from giving up, Ayrton began a spectacular comeback. By the end of the first lap, he had already gained 6 positions, and by lap 4, he had overtaken 4 more drivers and was in 4th place. Within 5 laps, he was already 2nd, trailing Prost, who had gearbox issues. Then, on lap 14, rain began to fall on some parts of the circuit, and the changing conditions benefited the Brazilian, who began to close the gap lap after lap. On lap 27, while they were trying to lap 3 back markers, Senna took advantage when Prost got stuck behind Andrea de Cesaris and overtook him. After a disastrous start, Senna took the lead and set consecutive fastest laps that pulled him away from his teammate. Prost, powerless, saw his 3rd title slip away. Senna crossed the finish line 13 seconds ahead of his teammate, secured the victory, and with it, his 1st world championship.
Ayrton Senna, Brazilian world champion.
That victory not only crowned him champion, but would also be immortalized as one of the greatest comebacks in Formula One. But not only that, even though neither of them knew it at the time, that was the last clean battle they had, because their rivalry was about to become the most ruthless ever seen in the category. The 1989 season started with maximum tension between Senna and Prost. Ayrton missed several preseason tests, and Ron Dennis relied almost solely on Alain to fine-tune the new MP45. And as if that wasn't enough, the season started off terribly during the race in Brazil, the first of the year. McLaren was no longer as dominant as in 1988. And had fallen behind teams like Ferrari and Williams. After their defeat on Brazilian soil, McLaren spent 8 days testing at Imola before the San Marino Grand Prix. And in qualifying, it was clear that the tests had been a success. Senna and Prost took the front row with Senna on pole. But not only that, they were more than a second and a half faster than Nigel Mansell's Ferrari, who had beaten them in the previous Grand Prix. Everything looked perfect for McLaren, but what nobody knew was that in that race, the clashes between Prost and Senna would go on to become the most intense, controversial, and ruthless war in the history of Formula One. Before the start of the Grand Prix, Senna proposed a pact to Prost. Whoever came out first at the start would keep the line until the Tosa corner without being attacked by his teammate. Despite the tense atmosphere, the Frenchman accepted. At the start, Senna kept the first position. Prost respected the agreement, and both of them entered Tosa, occupying the top 2 positions. On lap 4, Gerhard Berger's Ferrari left the track at Tamburello Corner after a mechanical failure. The Austrian crashed violently into the wall, and when his car stopped, it was covered in fuel and immediately caught fire. The fire was put out quickly, but the race was stopped with a red flag. Half an hour later, the restart took place. This time, Prost had a better start and overtook Senna before the first corner, and then the trigger for the war between them arrived. On the way to Tosa, Senna passed Prost at Villeneuve Corner, braking inside to retake the lead. In this way, Senna broke the pact that he himself had proposed, taking his teammate by surprise. From then on, Ayrton calmly drove toward victory, while Prost, furious about the incident, tried to catch up by any means. However, to the Frenchman's misfortune and his desperation, he spun out on lap 42 and his chances of winning disappeared completely. Thus, Senna achieved the victory. Meanwhile, Prost accused his teammate of disloyalty and breaking their agreement. Ayrton replied that the deal was only valid for the first start, not for the restart, and that his move began on the straight, not in the corner. But his explanation did not satisfy Prost or the team. Until that moment, no one knew anything about what had happened. But Prost looked very frustrated on the podium. Then he skipped the press conference and left the circuit furious. His anger led him to threaten to retire from Formula One. So Ron Dennis had to organize a private meeting for Senna to apologize. The Brazilian did it, but Prost later said that Senna had cried out of anger when he was pressured to accept the blame and apologize. This reached the press and the accusations became public. From that moment on, the relationship was broken forever. They both began to hate each other. The engineers from each garage stopped sharing information, and the most ruthless rivalry in the history of the category officially began. At the 1989 Mexican Grand Prix, Prost's relationship with McLaren and Honda was broken forever. In qualifying, Ayrton Senna once again took pole position ahead of his teammate. Then for the race, the Brazilian chose medium compound tires, while Prost opted for the softer compounds, confident those tires would let him challenge Ayrton from the start, despite starting on the dirty side of the track. Senna had a better start and managed to lead into the first corner ahead of Prost, who had a very poor start and lost 2 positions. However, Stefano Modena's spin caused a red flag, and the race was restarted with the original order, Senna first and Prost second. In the second start, Ayrton again outpaced Prost off the line and maintained the lead. The Frenchman, with his softer tires that gave him better grip, soon got behind his teammate's car. For several laps, Prost came out of the banked corner right behind Ayrton. But as he approached the end of the straight, he watched in disbelief as Senna's car pulled away. That's where his suspicion was born that Ayrton's Honda engine had more power than his. That effort destroyed Prost's tires, and he was forced to make an early pit stop. The McLaren team, however, made a serious mistake and gave him another set of soft tires instead of the medium ones he had come in for. Due to this, Prost had to pit again soon after for new tires. He returned to the track only a few seconds ahead of Senna, and despite having much fresher tires, he was still going slower than his teammate. Not only could he not pull away, but he was even lapped by the Brazilian. Senna won the race easily, and Prost could only manage 5th place. After the Grand Prix, Ron Denny publicly apologized to Prost for the mistake during his pit stop, but that didn't matter anymore. What happened in Mexico confirmed his belief that Honda favored Senna by giving him a better engine. From that moment on, not only was the relationship between Prost and Honda definitively broken, but also between Prost and McLaren. And all of this was proven in the most scandalous way possible a few races later in Monza. But before that, if you're enjoying this video, subscribe. For the 1989 Italian Grand Prix, the situation was critical. 2 months earlier in France, Alain Prost announced that he would not renew with McLaren, and in Monza, in front of the Tifosi, he made official his signing with Ferrari for the 1990 season. The atmosphere at McLaren was broken. Senna was still fully supported by Honda, while Prost complained that Ayrton's engine performed better than his. In qualifying, Senna took pole position with an advantage of 1.79 seconds over his teammate, who only managed to get 4th place, behind Gerhard Berger and Nigel Mansell. In the race, Senna had a perfect start and led from the beginning. On lap 41, while the Brazilian was still in the lead, after Mansell retired, Prost passed Berger to move into 2nd place. Curiously, Prost passed Berger in front of the main grandstand, leading to the unusual sight of the Tifosi cheering a McLaren overtaking a Ferrari. However, remember that Prost was set to replace Berger on the team the next season. Despite this, Ayrton continued to comfortably lead the race, until on lap 44, a roar from the crowd was heard when Senna's McLaren engine exploded. Ayrton had to retire, and it was the Frenchman who inherited the victory. And as if the relationship between Prost and McLaren wasn't already broken enough, at the podium ceremony, Ferrari fans asked Prost for the winner's trophy. And, even though it belonged to McLaren, he handed it over to the Tifosi. This gesture enraged Ron Dennis and the team's mechanics. With everything that was happening, Honda demanded an apology from the French driver regarding the accusations that they were favoring Senna. The engine supplier threatened Prost to stop supplying him with engines if he didn't do it, and that way, he wouldn't be able to finish the championship. Faced with this, the Frenchman had no other choice. He went to the McLaren offices and, with Ron Dennis, wrote an apology letter. Despite all the scandals that happened at this Grand Prix, McLaren Honda secured the Constructors' Championship with 4 races left to go, and the only thing left to decide was who would be the champion driver. And that title would have one of the most controversial outcomes in the history of the sport. At the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, at Suzuka, the Senna-Prost rivalry peaked amid cheating and corruption accusations. Ayrton had to win to keep his hopes of winning the championship alive. For his part, Alain knew that if his teammate didn't win, he would achieve his long-awaited 3rd championship. Before leaving McLaren and moving to Ferrari, Ayrton took pole position with an overwhelming advantage of 1.73 seconds over Prost, but things got complicated from the start. Pole position was on the dirty side of the track, and Prost overtook him before the first corner, took the lead, and built a comfortable advantage. Senna started to close the gap even after losing time in a slow pit stop. On lap 44, he had caught up to Prost, and 6 laps later, desperate for victory, he tried to overtake him at the final chicane. What happened was historic.
Oh my goodness, this is fantastic!
Prost turned off his engine and got out, sure he had won the championship. But Senna, aided by marshals, returned to the track. He made a pit stop to repair the front wing and in just 2 laps overtook the leader, Alessandro Nannini. At the same chicane where he had crashed with Prost, Senna thus completed an impossible comeback, took the victory, and managed to extend the championship fight to the last race of the season. However, after getting out of the car, Prost went to the stewards and asked them to review the legality of the maneuver. The podium ceremony was delayed, rumors grew, and finally the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile ruled that Ayrton had cut the chicane. When rejoining, he had not covered the full race distance and had to be disqualified. Jean-Marie Balestre, Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile president and Prost's friend, made a decision widely viewed as political and corrupt, determining the championship. The controversy sparked a war between Senna and Balestre.
Exclude Ayrton Senna's car number 1.
Ayrton called the decision a manipulation of the championship, and McLaren appealed, arguing the following.
Is that why he missed the Japanese Grand Prix? Where's the consistency?
Despite this, not only was the disqualification upheld, but Senna was penalized even more severely.
Such a stupid accident.
Senna described his feelings as follows.
I felt like a criminal.
Even to the point that he considered leaving Formula One, but he ultimately decided to stay. In that way, Alain Prost achieved his third championship, in what had been up to that point one of the most controversial endings in history. And with his third title, he left for Ferrari. He said working with Ayrton was impossible.
It became absolutely impossible to work with Ayrton.
What none of them imagined was that the outcome of the following year would be even more controversial. What happened at the 1990 Grand Prix was one of the most controversial and significant moments in the history of Formula One. After the controversial outcome of 1989, Senna returned in 1990, determined to reclaim the title he considered his own. It was his third great duel with Prost, this time on different teams. The season had been very close, and after a year marked by tensions with Prost and Balestra, Ayrton arrived at Suzuka with the perfect opportunity to get his revenge. Unlike the previous year, this time Senna would be the champion if Prost didn't win. In this way, for the third consecutive time, the crown would be decided at Suzuka. In qualifying, Ayrton secured pole position, but once again he faced the problem of starting on the dirty side of the track. After multiple complaints, the stewards agreed to move the pole to the clean side, but Balestra intervened and overruled the decision. And to make things worse for the Brazilian, Ferrari had been showing better pace in the last few races. Senna viewed this as another attempt to favor Prost and made his stance clear before the race.
The system has wronged me many times. Today things go my way.
At the start, Prost got off better and took the lead. But as they reached the first corner, Senna took the inside line and the inevitable happened.
Unbelievable, Senna is out at the first corner.
Both were out of the race, and Ayrton, though controversial, secured his second world title. Prost, furious, accused him of being a man without values and threatened to leave Formula One, claiming that Senna would do anything to win, and that he was not willing to compete with someone who was not afraid to die.
Ayrton has a problem. He believes he can't end his own life.
Initially, Senna denied that the crash had been intentional. However, in 1991, he admitted that it was deliberate and that it was his way of delivering justice after what happened the previous year. The action was heavily criticized in the paddock, where many felt he had crossed a dangerous, unacceptable line. In Suzuka, Ayrton not only became a two-time world champion, but it would also become one of the most controversial and legendary chapters in the history of Formula One. However, this was not the last encounter between Senna and Prost. But before that, if you've made it this far, you're probably enjoying the video, so subscribe. No matter the circumstances, Prost and Senna always found a way to show how much they hated each other. And what happened in the 1993 season was no exception. 2 years before the war between them exploded again. 1991 was dominated by Ayrton Senna, in a year when Prost couldn't put up any fight. However, during the German Grand Prix, they had their only encounter that year. During the race, Prost tried to overtake Senna on the inside. Ayrton defended the inside and forced the Frenchman to take the chicane straight, which made him have to retire the car. Prost said the following:
I had to overtake Senna. He blocked me throughout the whole race. That's not right.
To which Senna responded as follows:
I think everyone knows Prost by now. He's always complaining about the car, about the tires, about the team, about the mechanics, about the fuel.
Ayrton dominated the season and won his third championship. Prost, lacking a competitive car, openly criticized his single-seater, leading Ferrari to fire him for those remarks. The next year, the 1992 season was completely dominated by Nigel Mansell and Williams, driven by the electronic advances that were beginning to revolutionize the category. Seeing that he couldn't compete with them, Senna tried to sign with a British team. However, this revived his rivalry with Prost, even with the Frenchman out of Formula One. Throughout the 1992 season, rumors grew that the Frenchman would return in 1993 precisely with Williams. Finally, that rumor came true and Prost signed with the British team. But his contract had a very important clause that prohibited Senna from being his teammate. In response to this, Senna reacted furiously.
He's behaving like a coward.
Despite his protests, the Brazilian was powerless. Thus, the final battle of the legendary rivalry between Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna began. Although Ayrton seemed competitive in the early races, Williams' superiority let Prost win his fourth championship in 1993. With the title secured by the Frenchman, the last race of the year arrived in Australia. By that time, Prost had already announced his retirement at the end of that season. So he was about to compete in his last Grand Prix. The world was about to witness the final showdown between him and Ayrton Senna. The Brazilian secured pole position, which he later turned into a victory, just ahead of Alain Prost, who finished in second place on the podium. In the last moment they would share together as rivals, Senna took Prost and brought him up to the top step. A rivalry full of hatred, insults, and controversies ended with that gesture, which was forever framed. That was the end of the greatest rivalry in Formula One history, the most ruthless ever seen. And although it was spectacular to see how two of the best drivers in history competed for years on the same team, there was one race that achieved something even more incredible. Not only did two of the best compete under the same conditions, but it was a race with the 20 best drivers in the world driving the same car. A race that had 9 world champions competing and 2 more who would become champions in the future, including Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. So watch this video and find out what happened on one of the most memorable days in sports history, something that will never happen again.